It's strange how quickly the roles reverse, how the person who once couldn't stop reaching out becomes the one you can't reach at all. Tonight, I saw his picture again. Ethan. Standing in that soft golden light that hits around sunset, arm around her waist. Her name is Nora. She's beautiful in a way that feels effortless. Warm smile, hair curled by the sea breeze, eyes that look like she's exactly where she's meant to be. I stared at that photo for too long. Long enough for the algorithm to recommend me more. Long enough to feel that sharp ache in my chest again. I should have been happy for him. I should have smiled and scrolled on. But instead, I whispered the same words I've been avoiding for months. I told him I wasn't ready. And now, he's with someone who was. When I first met Ethan, I was the kind of person who believed love needed to wait until after everything else. After the degree. After the job. After I became someone worth loving. He didn't see it that way. He thought love was something you built while becoming that person. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I was sitting alone on the porch, scrolling through my phone to avoid conversation. He walked out, holding 2 drinks and a smile that looked like it belonged to someone who didn't try too hard to be liked. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I shrugged. "It's a free porch." He laughed, that warm, unbothered kind of laugh that made me glance up. He offered me a drink. "I don't drink," I said. "It's lemonade," he grinned. "I don't either." It started small, random texts, walks after class, quiet jokes that only made sense between us. He remembered the tiniest things, how I took my coffee, how I hated small talk, how I overthought everything. Somewhere between all those moments, he started falling. And I started running. He'd ask things like, "Do you ever think about the future?" And I'd always joke, "No, it's scary." He'd smile, but I could tell it hurt. One night, he told me he wanted to introduce me to his sister. I panicked. I told him I wasn't ready for that, for anything serious. His eyes softened, but something in them shifted. "Lila," he said quietly, "you don't have to be perfect to let someone love you." I didn't answer. I just looked away and said the only thing I knew how to, "I'm not ready." He nodded. There was no argument, no begging. Just a quiet acceptance that made it hurt even more. Then he said the line that still replays in my head when I can't sleep. "Then I hope one day someone is." And just like that, he left. Not angrily, not dramatically, just gone. It's almost funny how I thought pushing him away would protect both of us. Instead, it just taught me what loneliness really sounds like, his name echoing in my head, followed by a silence I created. He used to wait for my texts. Now he's waiting for someone else to call him home. And that someone isn't me. I didn't expect to see him again. Not in that way, not like this. It had been 6 months since we last spoke. I was walking down 4th Street, pretending to browse the small craft market, when I heard his laugh. It was faint at first, like an echo from another life, but unmistakable. My stomach twisted before I even turned. And there he was. Ethan. Leaning against a vendor's stall, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. He looked different. Lighter somehow. Like all the heaviness I left in him had finally lifted. And beside him was a woman, Nora. She was holding his arm, saying something that made him smile wider than I'd ever seen. I froze. It wasn't jealousy at first, it was disbelief. The kind of disbelief that tastes bitter and metallic. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. He looked happy. And that realization hit harder than I thought it would. He caught my eye for a second. Just one. His smile faltered, not out of awkwardness, but out of recognition. He gave a small nod. Polite. Controlled. Then turned back to her. That tiny gesture felt like a wall slamming shut. I went home that evening and sat in the dark for hours. It wasn't that I wanted him back. I just didn't want him to have stopped loving me. I thought if I wasn't ready, he'd wait. People always wait in the movies. But real life doesn't pause for your fears, it just moves on without you. I kept telling myself, it's okay, it's good he's happy, but the words felt hollow. Because deep down, I didn't want him happy with someone else. I wanted him to stay broken with me, at least until I figured myself out. A week later, I saw them again, this time at the cafe we used to go to. My cafe. Our cafe. I was sitting by the window, pretending to read, when they walked in. She wore one of those soft cream sweaters that looked expensive but comfortable. He pulled out her chair. That was my chair. The one I used to sit in when he teased me for taking too long to order. He didn't notice me until they were already laughing over something on his phone. When he did, his face softened into something careful, not cold, but distant. He nodded again. I smiled like it didn't hurt. But it did. Every second of it burned. That night, I scrolled through his profile for the first time in months. Every photo of her made my chest tighten. The captions were small, little moments of happiness. Morning walks. She laughs at my terrible jokes. Found my peace. Peace. That word alone broke me. Because I realized I had been his storm. I remembered the night he first told me he loved me, how I stared at him in silence, because I didn't know how to say it back. He'd smiled through it, told me it was okay, that he could wait. And he did. Until I made him believe waiting was pointless. Now someone else gets the version of him I helped build, the patient, gentle, steady man who used to stumble over his feelings. Someone else gets his morning texts, his silly playlists, his warmth. I tried dating again. It wasn't the same. Every conversation felt forced, every smile mechanical. I compared everyone to him even when I swore I wouldn't. And every time someone asked what I was looking for, I couldn't say it out loud, but in my mind, I always whispered, him. One evening, I found an old sweater he'd left behind, still folded neatly in my drawer. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it still smelled faintly like him, like rain and mint and something safe. I sat there holding it, whispering, "You were ready." I wasn't. And now someone else gets to be. I should have reached out, maybe. But I didn't want to disrupt what he'd found. I'd made peace with being the lesson, the one who teaches him how to love, so he can love someone else better. Still, sometimes I imagine what would have happened if I'd said something different that night. If I'd said, "I'm scared, but I'll try." If I'd said, "Stay," but I didn't. And now every what if sounds like an echo I can't silence. He used to be mine in quiet moments. Now he's someone else's laughter in public spaces. He didn't move on because I wasn't enough. He moved on because I told him to. It had been almost a year since the day he left. A full circle of seasons, each one peeling away another layer of what we once were. I'd learned to live without him, or at least I thought I had until the invitation came. It was for a mutual friend's wedding. The kind of event where you know you'll see people from your past, but convince yourself you're mature enough to handle it. I told myself it was fine. I even rehearsed a smile in the mirror, one that said, "I'm happy, I've moved on." But when I walked into that softly lit reception hall, surrounded by fairy lights and quiet music, the first thing I saw was him. Ethan. Standing near the dance floor, wearing a navy suit that fit too well, talking to Nora. They looked effortless together. Like two notes from the same song. I froze for a second, then reminded myself, "Breathe, Lila. You're fine." He noticed me before I could hide. His eyes softened, and for a moment, the air felt heavy again. He said something to Nora, then walked over. "Hey," he said. His voice hadn't changed, calm, gentle, grounding. "Hey," I replied, trying not to sound like my heart had just sprinted out of my chest. "You look good." "So do you," I said, smiling faintly. "It's been a while." He nodded. "Yeah, almost a year." "Wow," I murmured. "Time moves fast." "Yeah," he said quietly. "It really does." We talked about safe things, work, mutual friends, the wedding decor. But beneath the small talk, I could feel all the unsaid words pressing against my throat. The laughter in the room faded, and all I could hear was the silence between us. Finally, I said it. "I saw the photos. You and Nora. You look happy." He hesitated, like he wasn't sure what to say. Then he nodded. "I am. She's good for me." The words hit harder than I expected. I forced a smile. "I can tell." There was a long pause. Then he said softly, "You seem good too." I wanted to lie. To say yes, I'm happy, I'm over it. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. "I'm getting there," I said. Slowly. He nodded again, eyes gentle. "You always were slow to open up." That made me laugh, quietly. Still am. The music changed to slow, romantic. Couples started gathering on the dance floor. He looked toward Nora, who was chatting with someone near the table. Then, for a moment, he looked back at me. "Do you want to dance?" he asked. It was a question that shouldn't have meant anything. But to me, it meant you still remember us? I hesitated, then nodded. We moved to the edge of the dance floor. My hands trembled as his touched mine, not the same way they used to, not with that old warmth, but careful, respectful, distant. For a minute, we just swayed in silence. I could hear his heartbeat against mine, steady and sure. It reminded me of all the nights we'd sat on my couch in quiet when words weren't needed. "I wasn't ready," I whispered. He closed his eyes, exhaling softly. "I know. I thought pushing you away would make me feel free, but it just made me feel empty." He didn't say anything right away. Then, finally, he said, "I waited, Lila, for a long time, but I had to keep living." "I know," I said, voice trembling. "You were right to." He smiled, sad and sincere. "I'm glad you understand." I looked up at him, blinking through the blur of tears. "She's good for you, isn't she?" "She is," he said simply. "She doesn't make me feel like I have to prove I'm enough. She just lets me be." I nodded. The music faded, but neither of us moved. "You deserved that," I whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't give it to you." He looked at me for a long moment, the kind that makes the world slow down. Then he said, "You did give me something, Lila. You made me realize what love should feel like, even if it wasn't forever." I felt my chest tighten, not from pain, but from a strange kind of relief. Maybe this was closure, not the kind that fixes things, but the kind that helps you stop asking why. When the song ended, he let go of my hand. Gently. "I should get back to Nora," he said. Of course, I smiled, though my voice cracked. "Go." He hesitated for a second, then leaned in, just close enough to whisper, "I'm really glad you're okay." And then he walked away. Back to her. Back to the life I once could have had, if I hadn't been too afraid to say yes. I stood there for a while, watching him twirl her on the dance floor, their laughter blending with the music. And for the first time, instead of breaking, I felt something else, peace. He wasn't mine anymore. But he was happy. And maybe that was enough. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with swollen eyes and a quiet kind of calm. Not the absence of pain, that would have been too much to expect, but something gentler. Like my heart had stopped screaming and finally decided to whisper instead. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the pale morning light spill across the street. For the first time in a long while, I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll through old photos or type his name into the search bar. I just sat there, breathing. Maybe that was progress. The wedding had opened something in me, not a wound, but a door. Seeing Ethan again had forced me to confront everything I'd been avoiding. My fear, my guilt, my constant need to control what love was allowed to look like. For so long, I thought being not ready made me wise, like I was protecting myself from heartbreak. But all I really did was build walls and call them boundaries. I started writing again. Not about him, not directly, just little things. Journal entries, poems, fragments of thoughts. The kind of words that come when you're finally honest with yourself. One entry read, "You can't wait until you've healed to be loved. Sometimes love is the healing." I don't know where that came from. Maybe from him. Maybe from me. Finally understanding what he meant that night, he said, "You don't have to be perfect to let someone love you." I kept thinking about that line, how love isn't about being ready. It's about being willing. I wasn't then. But maybe someday I would be. A few weeks later, I went back to the same cafe. Alone this time. The air smelled like espresso and new beginnings. The barista, a new guy, smiled when he took my order. "Haven't seen you here before," he said. "I used to come here a lot," I replied. "Guess I'm starting over." He nodded. "Starting over's good. Means you're still trying." His words made me smile. Simple, but true. I sat at my old table, the one by the window, and watched the world outside. The same place that used to feel haunted now just felt familiar. The memories were still there, but they didn't sting anymore. They just existed. I started saying yes to small things again. Lunch with coworkers. A walk through the park. Signing up for a pottery class I'd always postponed. It wasn't about distraction. It was about living. About remembering that love wasn't the only thing worth feeling deeply. There were nights I still missed him, of course there were. Some habits don't disappear, they just fade into quieter versions of themselves. I'd think of him when a song came on, or when I passed the street where we first met. But instead of sadness, I felt gratitude. Because not every love is meant to last, some are meant to teach. And he taught me everything I needed to know about myself. A month later, I ran into Nora. It wasn't planned, just one of those small world coincidences that feel like the universe checking in. She recognized me instantly. Lila, right? Ethan's mentioned you. Her voice wasn't tense or guarded. Just kind. I smiled. Yeah, that's me. We chatted for a bit, about the wedding, the food, mutual friends. She was easy to talk to. Before she left, she said something that stayed with me. He's really happy, you know. And I think part of that is because of how much you helped him grow. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. I'm glad, I said quietly. He deserves it. And for once, I meant it without the ache. That night, I wrote another line in my journal. Sometimes you lose someone you love, and it feels like the end. But it's really the start of who you're supposed to become. Weeks turned into months. The ache turned into memory. And the memory turned into something softer, like sunlight filtered through curtains. One morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and realized I didn't see a girl defined by heartbreak anymore. I saw a woman who had been broken, learned, and rebuilt. Not perfectly, but honestly. I didn't need to forget Ethan to move on, I just needed to forgive myself for not being ready. It's strange how healing works. It doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in moments, small, quiet victories. Making breakfast without sadness. Hearing his name and smiling instead of flinching. Waking up and realizing your first thought isn't him anymore. And somewhere along the way, I stopped looking back. Because forward finally started to look beautiful. He taught me what I wasn't ready for. Now I'm learning what I deserve. It was almost 2 years later when our paths crossed again. Not planned, not dramatic, just life doing what it always does, reminding you that nothing ever really disappears, it just changes shape. I was leaving a bookstore downtown, clutching a new journal, when I heard someone call my name. Lila. I turned, and there he was. Ethan. For a second, time folded in on itself. The noise of the street faded, replaced by that familiar steadiness in his eyes. But it wasn't the same. The connection was there, yes, but softer now, steadier, like an old song you remember the lyrics to but no longer cry over. He smiled that same patient smile. Hey, it's been a while. It has, I said. You look good. So do you, he said, his voice warm, genuine. How have you been? Good, I answered, and for once, it wasn't a lie. Really good, actually. He nodded. I'm glad to hear that. We stood there talking like old friends, about work, about travel, about how fast everything changes. He told me he'd moved to the coast with Nora. They'd adopted a dog, started a small business together. His eyes lit up when he mentioned her name, that quiet spark of contentment you can't fake. And I didn't feel envy this time. I felt peace. Because seeing him happy didn't make me smaller anymore. It just reminded me that love, real love, always leaves something good behind, even if it's not yours to keep. When I told him about my new projects, about how I'd started sharing my writing online, he smiled. That's amazing. I always told you the world needed to hear your words. I laughed. Yeah, you did. Guess I finally listened. For a heartbeat, we just stood there, two people who had once meant everything to each other, now meeting as proof that endings don't have to be bitter. Then I saw her, Nora, crossing the street toward us, carrying 2 cups of coffee. When she reached us, Ethan's arm instinctively went around her. She looked up at him the way I used to, except this time, there was no sting. Just quiet understanding. Hi, she said brightly. You must be Lila. Ethan's told me a lot about you. I smiled. All good things, I hope. She laughed. Only good things. There was no awkwardness. No jealousy. Just 3 people standing in the sunlight, sharing a moment that once would have broken me, but now felt like closure wrapped in warmth. After a few minutes, Ethan checked his watch. We should go, the dog's waiting in the car. I nodded. Of course. He hesitated for just a moment, then said softly, "I'm really happy for you, Lila. You look at peace." I smiled, meaning it. "I am. Really, I am." He nodded, like he'd been waiting to hear that. Then he reached out, gently squeezed my shoulder, a gesture full of gratitude, not longing, and turned to leave. As they walked away, I watched them, their silhouettes fading into the afternoon light, their laughter soft and familiar. And for the first time, I didn't wish it was me beside him. I just wished them well. I walked home slowly, the city alive around me. The air smelled like rain and paper and coffee, the small, ordinary things that make life beautiful when you're finally paying attention. When I reached home, I opened my new journal and wrote the last thing I'd ever write about him. Some people aren't meant to stay. They're meant to change you, to show you the kind of love you weren't ready for, so when it comes again, you'll know how to hold it. I closed the notebook and smiled. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was gratitude. Because now I knew what it meant to love, to lose, and to let go with grace.